Welcome to our fourth TOK video. Today we're going to look at personal and shared knowledge and all their intersections. So we'll start with shared knowledge. This is knowledge shared by a group like a family, ethnic group, religious factions, companies, language community, any group of humans sharing knowledge, and that's going to do it. So some examples. This can include all three knowledge types that we've discussed thus far. So a culture may share practical knowledge, experiential knowledge in the forms of cooking techniques. So a family working together to make tamales or working together to create art would be practical knowledge, actually doing it. An ethnic group may share knowledge by acquaintance of their habitat, in that they know that mountain, they know that river. Society may share factual knowledge about its history through its history courses or history books, through its stories, as far as major events. Not every member of the group may know the shared knowledge, but the majority of the group is aware of the knowledge and does affirm it's true. So even if you're part of that group, so for example, even if you are Mexican but don't know how to make a tamale, it's still known that this is a thing. It's still true. It's still a tradition. Some more shared knowledge. We often rely upon shared knowledge for affirmation or refutation of our personal beliefs. So example is, my society believes in ghosts. And so this is going to reinforce my belief. So if I believe in ghosts and everybody around me believes in ghosts, it doesn't seem that silly, and so it feels normal to believe in ghosts. Whereas if I lived in a society that doesn't believe in ghosts, this would challenge my belief, and I might have to change that belief or really go against the grain, going against the norm, because it's not really part of that shared cultural knowledge. And so it can push or pull on that personal knowledge. Distributed knowledge is the combined knowledge of all the individuals in a society. And the larger societies, the more complex and knowledgeable a society becomes, the more it must rely on distributed knowledge. No one can know everything, so we often call on experts, and we just get so much more compartmentalized. So if I'm just in a small tribe, there's not a ton of distributed knowledge. We might have some specialization where that guy's a farmer and that guy's a hunter, but that might be the extent of it. But the bigger our society gets, we get more and more specialization. And so we get more and more experts. Even in the medical field, you don't just go to a doctor. You might have a primary care physician, you have a neurologist, cardiologist, so you have all these different specialists. Classroom discussions are kind of a nice example where we have all of your own personal knowledge, but through discussions we're able to kind of pull that together and kind of create this distributed knowledge, and we're stronger and better for it. And so this big idea is that I don't know how to perform heart surgery. However, as an American, we do. And we have people that can do that in our society. And so we're all together in this. Moving to personal knowledge. And this is the knowledge that we have through our own experiences and personal involvement. So it's not shared in the same way. Most babies, it is pure personal knowledge. And in that, just knowledge by acquaintance as they just explore their environment. So it's just based on the senses, what they're learning, and what they're able to consume through the senses. Sometimes we know something even without fully understanding it, and that we understand that the Earth's orbit around the sun causes the seasons, but we may not know the absolute details of why or the mathematics of it. We don't know the equations, we don't know the angles in which the Earth is shifting, but we still know that's kind of how it works. So it's still knowledge. Hey, we can still say that we know it without knowing all the finite details. And of course, personal knowledge can also be shared. My knowledge of how to speak Spanish is personal, but for various reasons, if it's family or whatever other experiences I have with the Spanish language, but many others share this language. I'm not the only one that knows it, otherwise it wouldn't be much of a language. And so we do get a bit of crossover between personal and shared quite often. Much of our personal knowledge is tacit. That is, it cannot be easily communicated to others. You just can't explain it. You can try. For example, I can read and play music written by Jimi Hendrix. And I can play it exactly as it is written on there, on the music sheet, but I will never play in his exact style. And so that's one of the tricky parts about art. I can read it, I can try to recreate it, but it's never going to be exactly the same. Some things you just can't. It's just too personal. A coach can only train a player so much before certain techniques are beyond explanation, and that you just have to practice over and over until you can kind of figure out what's going to work for you, and that you just can't explain it. It's something beyond. A parent recognizes the differences between their identical twins, but they may not be able to explain. And so some things are that tacit knowledge that are a little bit beyond what we can easily explain. Now let's look at how this interacts with the different ways of knowing in TOK, in that we can think about the different ways of knowing in terms of their contributions to shared and personal knowledge, and they all connect in personal and shared knowledge ways. Many of them seem like they're really, really personal, but again, it is a balance of personal and shared knowledge. So let's walk through some of them. Language. Languages evolve in different societies. They're constantly changing in that you probably have some difficulty if you're reading a Shakespearean play. And that wasn't that long ago. It's only 400 years ago that we were in the time of Shakespeare. And just in 400 years, the English language has changed dramatically, resulting in us almost losing our ability to speak Shakespearean or Elizabethan English. And a language can only function as a means of communication as far as it's shared. And because it's shared, it's changed over time. So what good is a language if no other people are using it? So it is personal in that I speak English, but it's no use if others don't speak it. If I create a new word, a neologism, I'm sure I mispronounced that one. Mean Girls reference, that is so fetch. It can only be embraced into the language and understood by other language users if I share what I meant by it. If others grasp onto it and understand my meaning, what I mean, that's when I say fetch. And if other people can stick with that, then it might catch on and become part of the language. And that we're constantly adding new words to dictionaries all the time as we come up with new ways to express new ideas. Without shared knowledge, there could be no language. So we need both. And I know how to do it, but I need others too. But how we hear and interpret language, it's also deeply personal. And that these certain words are going to be personal for me, even if you know the words as well. Emotion. Emotions are the subjective experiences of certain physical changes in our body. So a lot of it's chemical. And if these physical changes return to normal, the emotion disappears. And so if the chemicals shift in our body, we're seeing different emotions. And it is incredibly personal, a very personal way of knowing, and that you're never going to know exactly what it means, what my happiness is, or what my sadness is. It's mine. And so it's incredibly personal here. And this will shape our thoughts and behaviors. If I'm listening to upbeat, happy, peppy music, this will increase my serotonin levels and make me feel happy and positive. If I'm listening to sad music, this can contribute to a reduction in serotonin levels and make us feel sad and less positive. And so our outside environment can have an impact on the chemicals that are going to impact these emotions. These emotions can shape a lot of the other ways of knowing. How we interpret language, how we interpret sense perception, how we respond to issues of faith, how we use our reason. It can all be impacted in that if I'm having a bad day, if I'm feeling depressed and sad, it's going to have an impact on everything else around me and kind of drag everything else down. Sense perception. Our senses are what help us to understand the world around us, but our senses are only good as our sensory apparatus and our brain's interpretation of the data it receives. So I can see something, but if my brain isn't hooked up right, it doesn't matter. I can't interpret that correctly. And so I need all working parts working in sync, in that I can have my 5 senses, but if it's not connecting to the brain well, then what use are they? And so there are some flaws to these senses, then they have to connect well to the brain, and then the brain has to do its job in figuring out what did I just see. And so all these moving parts can lead to some problems when it comes to sense perception. And there's, beyond the 5 senses, there's additional senses that we can feel in different ways. And as far as hearing, vision, smell, taste, and touch, we also have the other senses as far as I can feel motion, equilibrium and balance. I can feel pain, temperature. These are things that are a little bit beyond, or at least subsets of some of these other feelings. If we are seeing the same thing, if we see the same car wreck, the way in which we perceive it's going to be a little unique. And so if you ask 5 people that saw the car wreck, what'd you see? It'll be 5 different stories. And then it could be the same thing. We saw it with similar eyes, but the brain interpreted it in different ways. And the same can be said of music. We're going to listen to the music in different ways. Conversations that we listen to, books that we read, foods that we taste, aromas that we smell, we can experience the same thing, but our interpretation will be different. And our perceptions still have much in common with the perceptions of others, in that we can share this thing, even if it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be still personal and shared. And we're more likely to believe some of our sensory experiences if they seem to be shared by others. And that if I think this tastes good, I'm going to say, hey, taste this. This good? And that little affirmation, it's going to say, okay, this is good. Now we share this knowledge. Let's move forward. And so it's crossing over personal to shared. And we do this with music as far as, hey, I like this, listen to this. And see, it's the same music. We're probably hearing it in the same way, but I'm trying to see, are you interpreting it in the same way? Imagination. When we talk about imagination, we're referring to the ideas and the images in our head, but it can also play an important role as far as knowing. It can impact everything else. In the arts, imagination can lead the way to the creation of something new, some new style of painting, some new thing I'm able to create in the arts, and I really need to get in my head for that. In history, this is how we can make good storytelling, and that we're going to dig up the evidence, and when we have this gap between the evidence, that's where imagination has to come in. We're going to use a bit of logic to fill that gap, but also a bit of imagination to figure out, okay, a little logic, but I want to have a good story. So history is going to use a bit of imagination too, because we don't know exactly what happened at all times. And so imagination and logic can help fill that gap and kind of put it all together to make a nice story. In the case of math, you're using imagination there. And this enables us to create and manipulate multi-dimensional spaces, which lead to new ideas and solutions. And we're trying to figure this out in our head and come up with new ideas, new ways. Intuition, that gut feeling. It's a way of knowing without relying on reasons or justifications. I just feel it. I feel it in my heart. I feel it in my gut. That could be many different words. It could be your conscience, your Jiminy Cricket, but it's that gut instinct. Many psychologists regard it as immediate ideas that are subconsciously based upon previous knowledge and experience. And it's not the top of your brain, it's a little bit deeper, and you're not quite accessing that deeper part of your brain, but you just feel like this is the answer. And your brain just hasn't brought it up to the front, so you're going to go with that gut feeling, and that gut feeling could be your brain, it could be logical, you don't know why. And so you're going to have to go with your guts, you go with that feeling, and eventually that idea may come forward, and you're going to figure out a little better why. Memory. We can't know anything without memory. It's all going to move together. It has to work together. I can't remember anything that I don't know anything. We cannot even claim to know that we are experiencing at the present because our present experiences are understood in the context of the past. I can't know where I am if I don't know where I've been. And it can be very personal. Only you have immediate access to your memories, but shared memories are essential to our societies, that we remember where you were on 9/11. We remember where we were for this moment and that moment. And so it's a little bit of a shared versus personal memory there. And that I have my personal experiences and memories of 9/11, but there's also this national sense and this international sense of where we were for 9/11. The collective memories of past generations are available to us through books, journals, folklore, stories, music, and they allow us to build on the knowledge of others. And so the collective memories of the past, we're able to stand on the shoulders of giants and kind of build up from the mistakes of the past, the victories of the past, and work our way up through memory. Faith. Most of what we know we accept on trust. During research, you're taking on faith that the author has been honest and accurate. And so, okay, I trust this historian. They know what they're talking about, so I'm going to kind of pick up where they left off. And that they have good ideas, I'm going to build on those good ideas and kind of move forward together. And so that is a bit of trust and faith. And so I think trust is another good way to put this, because it's not just about religion, and that this is all academia, and that we are building on the past and trusting that they knew what they were doing. If a dentist, and so other types of faith, we take on faith things told to us by our friends, our family, our teachers, and any experts, and that you're not going to have time to question every little thing, so some things you're just going to have to trust. If a dentist tells us we need a filling, we usually are going to take it on faith that, okay, I'm going to trust the dentist, you have the knowledge, you know what you're doing. If you don't trust them, you might go to a different dentist and get a second opinion. But odds are we just don't have time for that. So we're going to go with it and just trust them and move forward. And this is also a religious issue, of course, and that we can also take on our faith for our religious and cultural beliefs. And usually these are aspects of the world that we learn from families. And yeah, so that's another part of it. We'll talk about reason. Everything comes back to reason, or another way to call reason is logic. Everything in TOK, it's related to reason. It all comes back to, does this make sense? And the making sense is what we call reason. When we're setting up our arguments, saying, okay, this plus this equals this, that's using reason. If you're justifying, saying, well, I believe this because A, B, and C, well, you've set up an argument. You've used reason. We even use reason to kind of look at some of our other ways of knowing, in that I've got that gut feeling, and I may not go automatically with that gut feeling. I'm going to try to analyze it and figure out, is there a reason deeper than that gut feeling? Then we're going to look at our imagination and figure out, okay, I understand the pink unicorn, but can we make that pink unicorn happen? Is it logical? Are there really pink unicorns? And so this is my brain kind of trying to figure it out, make it make sense. Some ideas about what constitutes reason are shared, in that we do kind of have logical patterns. As far as mathematicians, philosophers, and logicians, they figure out, okay, what is logical reasoning and what is not formal logic? A plus B equals C. Okay, that makes sense. But formal logic, as far as deductive reasoning, this plus this equals this, it's never going to be 100% certain. A plus B equals C, but we're not sure. We need to really analyze C to be sure of that. And so I can't just take it on faith. I'm going to need something more. So A plus B probably equals C, but I'm not 100% certain, so I have to dig a little bit deeper. That's just deductive reasoning. So it's not going to take me all the way there. So there are some flaws there. All right, and that was our look at personal and shared knowledge.